Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to our irregular Monday stream.
Yes,
Oh, dear.
we have changed the regularity. Pray we do not change it further.
Yes. While we're getting introduced, I will give a quick weather report. And as we're saying hello to our members, hello, Bread and Circuses, hello, Shy Strike, hello to all our returning members, and obviously we've got Use the Eunuch there, who's one of our mods. Thank you, wrench holders. You keep the spam at shoe level. It's been cold. It's been very cold. It's been also been cold. It's been icy. It's been cold, and it's warmed up again a bit now.
Yes, and now it's probably going to be damp.
Oh dear.
But it's okay because my knees don't work, so I'll be all right.
Yes, but apart from that, no, we've been keeping okay. We just a lot of people have been a bit disappointed we haven't been streaming over the past couple of weeks.
But we say to you, what is there to stream about?
Or at least there is a lot of noise and not very much signal right now, and a lot of
Yes.
people seem to be annoyed with us for not focusing on the noise. This is why we wanted to do a stream entitled Political Amnesia, because all of this is frightfully familiar. Again, we do talk in mantras, but be calm, remember your training.
Yes.
It's not happening. We can't stream while people think it's happening, because when it stops happening, we like to poke people the sore spots. They see, it wasn't happening.
But it's very simple. If it is going to happen,
Yes.
you'll know it's going to happen. And if it's not going to happen, don't worry because you're not missing out on anything that's happening anyway.
Well,
So this is why you can't have FOMO, because nothing's actually happening.
in the narrative dead spot between the election and the inauguration, it seems that we are struggling for plot lines.
Oh, but we're in that awful bit in a film, what is it, like the end of Act 3? We're at lulls before the finale or whatever.
It's we're already in Slopvember, but I guess Slopuary.
Yes.
It's very red letter media.
Oh, it's been reheated.
It's been reheated.
My slop's years old and
my
reheated.
years old slop has been reheated. But what
But
we're talking
before
about, yes,
we get to the slop, if you want to support our slightly irregular streams and the very odd bits of writing we do, there is a number of ways you can do that.
yes,
You can support us on Ko-Fi by individual donations,
why don't it
which
just leave? There we go.
should be in the chat as a pinned message if it's not already.
It is not already, but it will be. I'm being disorganized here, but yes, if you want to support us, we do have the Ko-Fi there. We do have the Geopolitics Substack, which
Yes.
is it's still a little bit not quite
So
working correctly.
if anyone out there is a bit of a Substack guru, can you possibly give...
We have some sort of
Yeah.
caching issue or something, but it won't let us put the well, anyway, we'll sort it. That's not a priority at the moment. We'll get it sorted at some point. Thank you for your patience, Substack people. We'll get that sorted eventually, because holy crap, that's another thing that's just been dragging
Yes, and if you choose to as well, you can become a channel member or give us a donation on here via super
Yes.
chat or whatever, and we will endeavour to read it out.
We are still fully monetized somehow, so we still have this full suite of. Oh, thank you, Lamented Guy, for the $20.
The super sticker man himself.
The only
Right
man
on cue.
we ever know who gives us super stickers. So thank you,
But
thank you, Mr.
right
Lamented
on
Guide.
cue,
Yes,
we've had our weather report. Now it's time for the Overton report.
yes.
We have seen unsurmountable shifts in the Overton window in the last...
shifting.
Whoa!
Whoa!
God, the trough's gonna overflow. My trough runneth over.
Oh dear me. Well, as we all know, the internet isn't real, but people
No.
seem to think it is. And the trough overfloweth, it seems. We have a lot of good trough action today. A lot of good trough action over the last few weeks. And like I said, they've been running around the couch cushions, and
We
again,
are at SlopCon 4.
we are at SlopCon 4, yes. But they've been running around looking at the couch cushions, and what they've picked out is grooming gangs.
Yes.
And we'll talk about why they've done so in a sec, the various reasons why they might have done so. But there's been this bizarre news kind of trajectory where Americans hadn't heard about this, or at least pretended to not have heard about this before, or at least didn't pick up on it because it was just boring foreign news at the time. But the idea that people haven't heard about the grooming gangs, the rape gangs in quotes, if you've lived in Britain in the last 10 years, that's ridiculous.
Well,
It's been headline news multiple times over the last 20 years.
Yes.
And it's been very...
Local news.
Yes, it's been local news over the past, well, 50 years,
And
really.
it's not stopped.
No, the idea that this is intensified or subsided or is ebbed
Awareness
and flowed.
has increased.
Yes, it's ebbed and flowed as quote-unquote awareness has, is one of the great failings of what we refer to as unreality or hyperreality or however you want to call it. Things only start existing again when the news cycle highlights them. This is a great example of what I like to refer to as political object permanence. When something isn't part of the current paradigm, in most people's minds, even those in quote-unquote alternative politics, it stops existing. This is why we don't talk about a lot of hot-button issues directly. We talk about them almost in a meta sense, because the narrative doesn't matter. The current thing doesn't matter. Raising awareness doesn't do anything, and you should know this.
Yes.
Everybody really, when you sit them down and talk to them, knows this, and yet we've seen this big spasm of I'm raising awareness. We're not going to reuse some of our old memes because we reuse them so often. Maybe we'll have a roundup at some point.
Can I succinctly do it as I did on Twitter to make many people angry about a week ago? You are not part of a movement that will stop the grooming gangs or bring about remigration. You are being emotionally and psychologically manipulated into supporting the American empire and Zionism. And these people are that fucking evil that they will actually use the most just heinous stuff going. I mean, this is possibly up there with like I'd say it's even worse than like the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter coming up with a fake story about the babies in incubators, because this is real. And a lot of this happened. And a lot of people... this happened to in living memory. I mean, not to divulge too much about ourselves, but we live in an area that wasn't directly affected this, but everyone in surrounding areas.
Yes, it was directly affected by this. A lot of it never. It was everywhere. It was everywhere there are populations. There were these instances. Yes, it was here. Well, I'm not going to bring up the instance of it being here, but yes, it was. It was everywhere.
My point was more that when we think about people being red-pilled,
yes,
everyone round here is red-pilled on this issue.
The thing is, people are,
and they were for decades.
Well, people are, and we'll get towards that. People are exhausted by it, as we always talk about. And if I've not got it, I'll get it back up. But we always use the mantra: "What is no longer revelation is normalization." And what we are seeing here is a further normalization of the quote-unquote Islamic rape gangs and the fact that nothing can be done about them.
Yes.
Thank you for the £20, the Shy Strike. Good evening to my favourite 77th Brigade officers. Good job, guys. Hope you make one of...
They make one of you a lieutenant soon.
Sorry, I'm having a dyslexic moment there. But thank you. But I was incensed by this because people were screaming at us, why do you support the rape gangs? It's just, well... this hasn't just started. The fact that you think this has just started happening is a huge problem. It's a massive problem. And it is really this idea of object permanence, that people do not understand what isn't real because they buy into the news cycle. And if you buy into the news cycle, you've already lost. So
let us try and explain to you why we think this has happened. And why this story has been brought back up again.
Well, to give you a bit of background, what happened though is there was a wide-scale acknowledgement that it did happen.
Yes.
There was a report that was into child safety, it was into child sex abuse in general. They compromised and said that would be the report, not a quote-unquote grooming gangs investigation, because that would be politically toxic, in quotes. We had in 2023 this re-flare-up by an activist named Ella Cockbain, who I'm convinced may or may not be, I don't know, sometimes my brain goes, these people aren't real. This is stupid. But Ella Cockbain, who is basically a tissue paper liberal activist who was put up to start questioning whether or not this happened. And what I've ended up with now is a permanent dialectic between this happened and this didn't happen. And we're not talking about the events, we're not really talking about, in a wider sense, the solutions. What there is here is still this lingering debate of it happened, it didn't happen, nothing becomes resolved. And the latest flare-up has already removed itself from the narrative of the the rape gangs, of all these things that, again, we've known about in Britain for 2 decades in terms of headline news, and it's become about Musk and Farage and Tommy Robinson. And we've had this flare-up on Twitter in all of these social media places. There's been flare-ups in the news. There's been back and forth. The Prime Minister's commented on it. Elon Musk has commented on it. Muskie, Daddy Musk has finally moved. He's moving the Overton window, guys. You can feel it shifting. But already the story has petered out and become about the personalities involved, as it always does, and not the issues. Musk says that Farage doesn't have what it takes to reform UK leader, and it's because he wouldn't allow in Tommy Robinson, who, as we all know, is a further backstop.
Yes.
And that is really just the state of things.
I actually thought there was a bit of brilliance to this, right?
Yes.
Because if you are Farage, you are damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yes.
You play the safe move of walking away from Tommy, walking away from Musk, and what you do is disappoint all the energized young Zoomers. And, in a sense, go back to the old conservative fuddy-duddy elites he used to hang about with. Or he could turn round, dissuade all the old money by going with the Tommy thing, and then pissing people like us off anyway, because he's just going to piss us off, because we don't like Tommy Robinson, because he's a Zionist. So, no matter what Farage does, given this dialectic between Tommy, no Tommy, and Musk, no Musk, and whatever else, he has got nowhere to go. And yes, as AA is pointing out in the chat, there is, of course, the other debate going on here, which is pro-Muslim sort of types in Labour who would rather minimise all this. Meanwhile, at the same time, and this is not me suggesting that people are going around putting misinformation out there, but if my legitimacy came from fighting Islam, I would be talking the shit out of this.
Yes.
And that is what's going on. And I think to a certain extent, probably Nigel Farage is sitting there thinking, why the fuck do I have to talk about Islam 24/7? I thought this was Britain. But maybe that's exactly the image that a certain subset of American and British press figureheads would have you believe, that this is already some sort of Muslim taken over country.
As A is pointing out there in the chat, and I'll talk about Andy Burnham as well, the Mayor of Greater Manchester. I won't go down on the screen, but the Mayor of Greater Manchester and Sarah Champion here have both called for a national inquiry, which means that it is on reservation. This is a very on-reservation conversation. And what you have there, yes, she's also an anti-Zionist MP who wants to censure Israel.
I don't know if that's the exact same person, mind. We did have the Ella Cockbain thing up earlier.
Oh, sorry, the Ella Cockbain.
And this is what I meant about your more pro-Palestine people wanting to minimise this. Yes. Meanwhile, you're, counter-jihad trying to maximise it.
Yeah, she's in the counter-jihad side, and the ones saying there shouldn't be an inquiry and this didn't happen are on the kind of anti-Israel stinky brown side.
Yes, stinky, smelly brown.
You have both of those two things kind of in opposition here, and you have them really within the Labour Party itself. You can see this as very much an kayfabe-friendly inter-elite spat,
whilst at the same time keeping you in a constant state of psychological horror by bombarding you with details about this, whilst at the same time coughing up old video clips of like Bakabazi boys in Pakistan or some white guy getting bludgeoned to death with a hammer or something like that.
This comes hot on the heels of, right at the end of December, we had another narrative which people have already forgotten about. This is why I've entitled this Political Amnesia, because people have already forgotten about the H1B debate.
Yes.
In a month's time, you won't remember that at all. That'll be gone. It will be a minor flare-up. It was a minor thing. And what we're seeing is, it's almost like a sine wave getting smaller, or a bouncing ball. As the energy dissipates and as Trump gets cycled in and it becomes more and more obvious that he is a regime candidate with not a dissident bone in his body, as the energy dissipates, the news cycles get shorter, and the attention span gets shorter, and the energy gets smaller.
And the oscillation becomes more rapid.
And the oscillation becomes faster. And we have this faster and faster cycle on the quote-unquote right of this act of political amnesia. Again, we have all of this, the UK's being told to consider letting its IS members return because they could be a danger to Syria, because they might be put in a Syrian prison and break out.
But who did he then use to talk about this as well? It was Nigel Farage of all people.
Yes, it was. There was once again Nigel Farage who came out and said that Shemima Bingham spy for Canada.
And it's interesting.
Again, the thing is that Bingham, she is the real state of the repatriation debate. The real state of the immigration debate is whether or not we should allow back Shemima fucking Bingham. She was a BBC star. She had her own little BBC sound series. She was an intelligence asset for the Canadians.
She'll be on Big Brother next
which
year.
is Five Eyes. The Five Eyes are an integrated security service. So she was an intelligence asset in certain ways. And the idea that she is currently sat in a prison or a refugee camp is absurd.
Yes. I don't think we have to play the Farage clip. We do have it as one of the links coming up. But I just find it really interesting that, once again, I
don't think I actually have it here.
It's one of the links up here.
Right, okay.
The nature of dealing with this issue in Britain must come at the behest of what Sebastian Gorka, as a incumbent press guy and foreign policy guy to Trump, who's not even in yet, but we've got to go off his opinion that if we leave Shamima Begum and all the IS assets that are ours, mind, in Syria, the Syrian regime will let them go, and that'll cause a whole big rebel crisis again, and then we'll have to go back into Syria and fight them. So instead of the Syrians just killing these people because they're British assets that ruined their country, we have to go and protect them. So we've got to reinvigorate Shamima Begum's fucking public image, using people like bloody Nigel Farage to do so. At the same time...
Should we quickly play the people the clip, or
no? Because I think we've pretty much explained it.
We have already
detail.
Yes,
but the whole thing is that our policy on immigration is becoming a subset of America's foreign policy.
Yes,
through the vehicle of people like Nigel Farage, or a Kemi Badenoch, or an Elon Musk, or a Tommy Robinson, or whoever at the New Culture Forum. All these people seem to be talking about the same things in the same way.
Well, I won't link it again, but if you want to look at our streams on the baseball pit and the whole neocon, we've talked about this in general. What we've seen is the use of Nigel Farage and the use of Elon Musk in basically pounding and saturating people within the little ball pit that is Twitter with all of this propaganda, with all of this kind of stage dialectic. You have the idea that the debate here is, a sensible debate about whether or not we should allow Shamima Begum back to the country. But that is the state of the debate, and it's the state of the Reform Party, which is an absolute state. We are having all of these debates on the same ground. I mean, how long has the Shamima Begum debate been going on?
The Shamima Begum debate will last longer than the Reform Party does. Mark my words on that.
Most likely, yes, but we're having these exact same conversations with the exact same people involved, and we're supposed to pretend that this isn't reheated.
I think we're not, actually. I think we're having a different conversation, because when we first talk about Shamima Begum, it's about her relationship to Britain, and whether or not she's besmirched her citizenship that she might have had here.
Yes.
And whether or not she was vulnerable.
Has she got enough British values back now?
But now it's not even about that. It's about her as a chess piece in a giant geopolitical game. So we're not even really setting our own framing for this conversation anymore. That comes from elsewhere. And it would seem to me that if the Reform Party isn't actively doing something at the moment, the only thing it exists to do is spread awful American fucking culture war stuff into British culture as a complete and utter act of imperialism, and it's naked and plain.
I will go over that.
I'm sick of it.
But this is the state of the centre right. This is from Douglas Murray. This is from March last year. But still, it's the in-group communication you have from centre right figures like Douglas Murray is so extreme and bizarre to most people that it becomes off-putting. But it's not meant for that audience. But, European Jew hatred, too deep to identify even after years of therapy.
That we call denazification.
Yeah, the British journalist is one of Israel's most articulate defenders, talks about JNS about media bias and anti-Semitism. It is this civil rights debate where the civil rights cause celebre of the centre-right is anti-Semitism. It is purging the world of attacks on their primary client group and their primary victim group. They play exactly the same role as the Muslims do in the leftist debate. They are both, naughty and nice. The Muslims are naughty because of terrorism, but nice because they are a minority.
There are cheap workers, and ex-Muslims are the bravest people in the world.
Well, the European, the Jews are naughty because Zionism and apartheid state and bad, don't bomb the Palestinians.
But we understand why they did it.
Yes.
Never again.
But never again, because they are a small protected group who has Western values, TM, and therefore they must be our client group because we can't advocate for ourselves because civil rights.
Yeah.
And so you must put everything through the lens of the client group.
The chosen people specifically.
Yes, the chosen people. I don't know. Who do you think loves Israel more, Musk or Farage? There's only one way to find out. Fight!
You made it complicated, but be clear. A sovereign state of Israel has been attacked. War has broken out. For decency, we must stand 100% with Israel.
There we go. Let's let Mr. Musk and well, here he is. I believe his affirmations at the end here. A bit of and ahhing, but there we go.
Massively misrepresented, especially in the Western media. Obviously, I very much support the state of Israel.
I don't know who do you think affirmed it better there, guys?
Yes, and.
Sorry, it's probably got some stuff.
Is that is this one or is it the first one?
You know what?
The giant, of course.
I'm just, you know what? I'll give you an extra affirmation here. Here's your bonus affirmation for today. I'll play this one in full.
I want to give prudent answer, and in case of Israel, I don't know how to resolve this conflict, to be honest.
I guess maybe another way to say it is: do you unequivocally support the existence of the state of Israel?
Yes, of course.
Okay, that's what people want to know.
Yeah,
absolutely. Come on, questions that maybe seem very obvious, but
of course,
no. Oh, yeah.
Yes, of course.
Oh, yes. Now I see where this question. No, absolutely. Yeah. So we need to protect the existence of Israel, and we need to protect not only the existence of the state of Israel. I also think that Benjamin Netanyahu have made many mistakes in the past, to be honest. But we also need to take our responsibility as a German nation state to protect Jewish life, Jewish people in our country. I want to give prudent.
There we go. It's basically the 14 words there, but with some things rearranged.
Yeah, that's the AFD's Alice Weidel for you. I'm sure her and her Malaysian girlfriend, or whatever her face is, will do so much for the German people. And by the German people, I mean German people of all races, colours, nations, and faiths.
No, I just like people to drink this in. I have one more. Maybe I'll have a couple more clips just to give you them, just to make sure that you understand how much the AFD and Elon Musk, rightfully so, love the nation of Israel. Here, have a little bit more. Ooh.
A Jew of the Palestinians here. Well, a Jew could not walk through the street anymore, right? And we have a huge potential of anti-Semitic crime against the Jewish people. And to be very frank here, the AfD is the only protector, and I'm saying that, like, very frankly, the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD, can only be the only protector of the Jewish people within here in Germany.
It just tugs at my heartstrings.
Yes.
What this awful world does to the Jewish people. They don't deserve this.
Well,
come on. Everyone in the chat, I want to see hearts and stars of David, and I want you to tell me how much you love Israel too, chat.
We'll have one more, okay? We'll do one.
I don't think my heart can take it anymore. These people have struggled for too long.
we'll leave that one for your imagination then. God damn it! But yeah, it's if you want to go, do check us out on X. We'll be there. Probably not forever though. We're thinking of basically leaving the platform.
Yes, I think I exist there to just annoy people now, and that's the only utility out of it. But anyway. Everything has changed.
Everything has changed.
This changes everything.
Changes everything. There we go.
Another base sprog has written some piece for Unheard about how things have changed.
Yes.
Left-wing academics are now primary targets of cancel culture. A large body of evidence suggests that academics in the English-speaking world are more likely to face professional sanctions for offending left-wing sensibilities than for offending right-wing sensibilities. Yet, the reverse may be true when it comes to the issue of Israel-Palestine. Since the start of the current Israel-Hamas war, many academics have been sanctioned for expressing what they regard as legitimate pro-Palestine views. Have we entered a new era of cancel culture? Research by Eric P. Kaufman and Pippa Norris indicates that the victims of academic cancel culture are disproportionately on the political right. Academics with right-wing views report much higher levels of self-censorship because they're pathetic, and are more likely to say that they've been subject to bullying or disciplinary action because they're pathetic. Meanwhile, a non-trivial fraction of left-wing academics openly admit that they would support ousting a colleague who carried out controversial research on diversity, imperialism, traditional parenthood, or group differences in performance. One area in which there have been notable cases of censorship against the left is Israel-Palestine. In 2007, the pro-Palestine scholar Norman Finkelstein was denied tenure at DePaul University after a lobbying campaign by the pro-Israel law professor Alan Dershowitz. I mean, this is your life. This is the theatre of Bolshevism. I hope you want Norman Finkelstein or Alan Dershowitz, because there ain't fuck all in between. In 2014, another pro-Palestine scholar, Stephen Salitaya, was denied tenure at the University of Illinois following pressure from wealthy donors. Ooh, wealthies might have echo quotes around it, Noah. Over the last year, many others have faced sanctions in connection with pro-Palestine campus activism. It's just like those young teenagers at Columbia. They just hate Jews.
Well, I'd like to point out that this is very characteristically slippy.
Yes.
It is extremely slippery because, one, it says that Zionism is right-wing activism.
Yes, of course.
And that the right wing...
It couldn't be anything else, could it?
And therefore, I've explained before how Muslims play double duty, that they are not compatible with us, but because we can't admit they're not compatible with us, that we have to have this liberal contortion where it's a failure of integration, but we have to create the security cage while we integrate them. It's the opposite situation as well when it comes to tolerance, the other direction, when it comes to protecting the Jewish people who are integrated. You know, there's all this stuff about how well integrated they are, but you have this dialectic where it's like, well, we can't actually victimize the Muslims. We can't actually victimize anyone because we're liberal, we're good, we live in a state of, you know, civil rights and common sense civil rights, and it really does do it from the opposite direction here. This is a real attempt to talk almost about the pendulum swing, in quotes, and talk about being interested in freedom, but really what it is, it's the bundling together of issues once again. It's the bundling together of all rightward political movements into this bucket of Zionism. And it takes that as a pretext. It takes that as given. It takes that as settled and normal and uses that as the jumping off point for talking about this.
I just want to point out, for the sake of our own flow here,
yes,
as there's some slides you wanted to get to.
Oh, I was going to... I thought this was more appropriate before we got to that.
Cool. Right, no, we're moving on.
Here is a great example of the liberal compromise.
Yes.
And the liberal compromise is is something that has taken place before our eyes with the grooming gangs debate, in quotes. What we have is mainstream politics, where the liberal compromise is incubated. And within mainstream politics, Nigel Farage exists on the outer edge of it. What people see who buy into the process is this idea, this tantalizing idea that the Overton window could move because Tommy Robinson's allowed him to reform, and because reform is a mainstream party.
But they're talking about the grooming gangs again. So the Overton window, we can only conclude, must have shifted.
Well, the big elephant in the room is the answer to all of this they're talking about is a public inquiry. I've talked to death about the political amnesia in the Iraq War and the Iraq War inquiry. I will not, and I've done it. I've done it on a number of occasions. I will not get back up my freedom fries and coronation chicken piece because I've used it in about 5 different videos.
Yes,
But the best example of this is the Blair era. It is the amnesia in the wake of the Iraq War. It is the idea that people believe they wanted it at the time, but believe they didn't want it afterwards when they did.
Yes.
What we have here is another example of that. Is we have this political amnesia where people have forgotten about the grooming gangs. It comes back up as a debate, and the liberal compromise process is between it didn't happen and we need an inquiry. But the harder-edged, in quote, solutions, the remigration, as people call it, all of that stuff is considered politically unacceptable.
Yeah,
it is beyond the line.
That's why Mary Harrington and everyone else is running around on Twitter fed posting about how everyone needs to be hanged.
Yes, but it doesn't do anything.
But I want to point out a specific bit of language you used there.
Yes.
You said a public inquiry,
Yes.
not a national inquiry. Because who is the compromise point? Who's the man that provides a solution? The man who's currently in power, Keir Starmer.
Yes.
It is our possible suggestion that what might actually happen here is that, well, you won't have a national inquiry.
Yeah.
People like Andy Burnham and whatever else will continue to pipe up about how this affected their local area specifically.
Yes.
And actually, in truth, because they're a bit clever, dealing with Sikhs that have been groomed by Muslims, or dealing with people from Eastern European communities that have been groomed by Muslims, will be different than dealing with white people that have been groomed by Muslims.
Yes.
So what we are likely going to see is a plethora of never-ending local inquiries ran by newly elevated commissars that are meant to administer this, that, and the next thing, who have infinite power except but they're also powerless,
Yes.
and have loads of accountability except when they're accountable. And in short, nothing will go anywhere with this. But what we will have is a new legalistic norm to go by.
What I want to highlight, what I want to drive home here is that the result on the debate, the result of the debate on the right, in quotes, will fall somewhere between what Kemi Badenoch wants, or Kemi,
What they represent.
yeah, what they represent, sorry, and what Nigel Farage wants and represents, and that the wet point basically between modern Tory and modern Reform, and Farage has been basically thrown out of an airlock by many of his supporters because he has revealed himself once again to be a total wet. But it's not just that process. We also get this process of compromise with the quote-unquote left. The liberal compromise demands that the right must then compromise with the left once it's compromised within itself. And the left this position, in quotes, is very solidly, it didn't happen. Or it didn't happen in a racially and religiously charged way, which basically is the same thing as saying it didn't happen. So the compromise point there is confused because you can't compromise with an extremely solid position of it didn't happen. So what we're having in the press is this dance of, well, it sort of happened. And that is the end point here. The end point of this whole thing, because of the way politics must work and the way the liberal compromise must work, because it's a liberal democracy, we have to compromise between parties. No one fully gets what they want. The center point, in quotes, the balance point, is exactly what they're aiming for. And it's the same thing every time. It's by the numbers, down the middle, no one's ever happy, confused neoliberalism. And it ends this way every time because that's how the political system is designed. You have these compromises, and actually what you get is people pitching either sides of the point that people want to be.
Yes.
But you mentioned the local councils. What's really going to come out of this is possibly a national, or at least many different local definitions of Islamophobia. Here we have the Muslim Council of Great Britain applying pressure. Here it is in late December. Islamophobic hate crimes surge. MCB urges stronger legislation and unified action. What they're pushing for is something concrete. They're not asking for an endless inquiry. They're asking for Islamophobia legislation, just like there is very nearly an official stance on anti-Semitism, but not quite. We'll get to that. But you have the backdrop of this is that you will push in meaningless ways. There's a meaningless narrative hijacking attempts going on by someone like Elon Musk. But the press report an increase in Islamophobia, and therefore the therapeutic state must go into action and say, we have to do something about this Islamophobia.
Look at the way people are being radicalized by what Elon Musk's posting. Woo!
Yes.
Don't you remember the Southport riots that happened?
So, in the same way that it happened during the War on Terror, the increased security, considerations that target everybody, because we live under, universal law. We live under, one man, one vote.
Equality under the law.
Yeah, equality under the law. That means that all security enhancements must also apply to native British people. But also, there must be concessions given to the Muslim population because we all know that the security concerns are all about Muslims. And so we have to assuage the concerns of Islamophobia. And that's how this two-directional thing comes. That's how when there is a surge in neocon jingoism, there is a surge in visible token anti-Islamic sentiment, there's also a surge in concrete measures to combat Islamophobia. That is how this dance is done. That is how, during the War on Terror, when Muslims were the villains of the peace, they were the enemies of liberalism, that is how they managed to gain so many concessions of law in Britain, Europe, and even in America.
Meanwhile, at the same time, a subset of elites use the opportunity to solidify the position they have and greater centralise their control.
Yes.
Oh, who'd have guessed
Hooray!
it? I don't know if you want to quickly check some of the chats first before we move on.
I'm double checking we've not missed any fan funding.
Oh, there's dyslexic generator. Ooh, a butterfly. I suppose that's meant to say ooh, a butterfly.
Ooh, butterfly, yes.
Shower strike again. I hope America turns into Rhodesia, but worse for what they did to our people and our project. I'm going to say no comment on that. And then he's also suggesting Robert Jenrick boosting / reposting real dissident fash Keith Woods. Elon boosting Connor, such many cases. The based sprogs are everywhere, and they are an infestation.
Here's an example of this happening. The Times has a clumsy framing here. Rape area councils brand Asian grooming gowns a racist term. Oxford, Newcastle, Greater Manchester, and Calderdale have adopted an Islamophobia definition produced by MPs that condemns stereotypes and tropes about Islam. Again,
and this is the, bear in mind, I just want to point out, this is the all parties parliamentary group definition from 2018,
which is
that half the sitting Tory MPs that are now arguing about voted and agreed for.
It's also a compromise because they had a functioning MP definition of anti-Semitism.
Yes, which is the other half of this, of course.
Yes, it is. Because they had a working definition of anti-Semitism, the Muslim carve-out demanded a working definition of Islamophobia, and therefore they got one because of equality under the law and civil rights. That's how the dance is done.
And of course, they kvetched about this.
Yes.
How dare they expand the definition of Islamophobia to suggest that grooming gangs and being critical of them is, or God forbid, why don't we just go straight to what the folk from fucking J'accuse and Pimlico said?
Yeah.
Questioning the grooming gang should be as dangerous as questioning the Holocaust. And I will say no more on that. This is what these people said.
Yes, it is. That's
now,
exactly what they said.
People ask me, why do you not like Tommy? Why do you disparage someone like Carl when he says something about this issue, or go at other people when they're just bolstering awareness? Because they're bolstering awareness for a subset of people who want to turn around and say questioning the grooming gang should be as bad as questioning the Holocaust. And if I have to explain to you further than that, I want you to leave. In the words of a good friend of mine, get out.
Well, again, here we have UK government's adoption of the IHIR definition of anti-Semitism. The UK Parliament adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism in December 2016.
Do you know what I'm not going to do?
What?
I'm not going to read another word of this page, because if it's like the BBC bloody bite-sized one, we'll get banned because we've read this.
I was about to say exactly the same thing. Yes, our crayon drawing stream got banned for reading a BBC bite-sized definition of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, so we'll be reading no more definitions of anti-Semitism. You, the viewer, will have to work out what that
December
means.
2016, this was passed, and the definition, the MP's definition of Islamophobia was passed in direct response to it.
To be fair, this was adopted later on in 2016, mind, I believe. Oh no, sorry, I've got my words all mixed up there. Yes. Apologies.
Working definition in 2016, and then there was a working definition in 2018 of Islamophobia.
Yes.
But all of this leads us to the current moment, the current condition, the new paradigm. This, I think, is possibly the most egregious.
I think this is the most Michael Gove thing you could do in the world.
I feel like we could have written this to try and discredit Michael Gove. But
I know, I wouldn't bother, because I don't think, up until I saw this, I don't think it was actually possible to further discredit Michael Gove. But now I realise that is possible.
The IDF should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Thank God Israel had the courage
to sometimes ignore its most powerful ally. start of this, by the way,
is that him giving Blinken a fucking hard time?
It's him giving Blinken and Biden a hard time for not pushing the Star of David high enough. But the opening paragraph here is amazing because it justifies everything we have said over the past 4 years. This is the distillation of everything we have said over the past 4 years. It may be unfashionable to quote Donald Rumsfeld, but the former US Defense Secretary was right more than he was wrong, and he was never more right than in the words he uttered when he appointed in 2001 and repeated when he left office in 2006. Weakness is provocative. Time and time again, weakness has invited adventures that strength might have deterred. Yes, might well have deterred.
As if ever we needed reminding of that truth, the words that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke as he prepared to leave office this month have only reinforced it. He said in an interview with the New York Times, whenever there has been public daylight between the US and Israel and the perception of pressure building on Israel, we've seen it. Hamas has pulled back from agreeing to a ceasefire and the release of hostages. With this daylight, the prospect of getting a hostage and ceasefire deal over the line becomes more distant. So Blinken believes that ever since October 7th, 2023, whenever the US has been weak in its support for Israel, whenever it has criticised the Netanyahu government, whenever it has shied away from full support for the campaign to neutralise Hamas terrorism, then peace has become more distant and the fate of the hostages more terrible. You almost have to pinch yourself and rub your eyes on reading those words.
Not because they're incoherent, they make perfect sense, of course. Hamas are going to fight harder and longer if they think Israel's allies are wavering and unsteady. The history of the last century and beyond shows terrorist actors and aggressive states are more likely to strike and to carry on with the conflict if they sense weakness and irresolution on part of democracies. From Britain's ambivalence on whether it would intervene on the eve of the First World War to Osama bin Laden's preparing for the 9/11 atrocity, while the Clinton White House was pressuring Israel to sign a peace deal with the Palestinians, the impression of inconsistency is the incentive for it. The paragraph here is so dense. It's such a dense reinvocation of the war on terror. I would like to say, we fucking told you so. We told you this was coming back. You didn't believe us. And here we are. Here we are with Michael Gove quoting Donald fucking Rumsfeld and saying that 9/11 was possibly contributed to by the fact that America would not appease Israel fast enough and deep enough. No, the reason why Blinken's words are disorientating is that he is not a Team Trump MAGA cheerleader denouncing the weakness of the Biden White House. He is Joe Biden's diplomat-in-chief, the author of precisely the strategy and exactly the mistakes that he now holds responsible for inflicting more misery on both the Israeli and Palestinian peoples. It's as though Neville Chamberlain were to denounce whoever the guy was behind the whole Munich
give me
thing.
the concluding paragraph here. I've got to see it. What's the bottom one? Yeah, we'll go for the top two.
I want to keep going because this is amazing.
Will we just go for the rest one in full then?
So I just want to read through most of this.
Blinken and Biden chided Israel from November 2023 over tactics, strategy, the execution of the war, and the implementation of their ground operations. In March 2024, the Biden administration told Israel not to enter Rafah. In April, Blinken said that unless Israel changed course, the US would change its policy of support. The Biden-Blinken team also tried to stay Israel's hand in dealing with Hezbollah. This was not so much the creation of daylight between the US and Israel as a 1,000-megawatt torch directed at their differences.
The West has cause to be grateful that the Netanyahu government chose not to follow the Biden-Blinken lead, rather than show the sort of weakness that would have won sympathy from the White House, but won no battles on the ground. The Israeli government demonstrated the sort of strength that is the only path to enduring peace, by crippling Hamas's ability to fight and removing its military leadership, then neutralizing much of Hezbollah's offensive capacity, and taking similar steps with its leaders. Israel dealt devastating blows to the terrorist organizations dedicated to its destruction, and it advanced the cause of peace more widely.
The daylight into which the prisoners of Syria's jails at last stumbled was daylight that dawned following Israel's actions in weakening. There's your consistency with him and Farage there on the Syrian prisoner bit. That dawned following Israel's actions in weakening Hezbollah, Hamas and their sponsors in Iran. The pillars propping up Assad's regime had been shaken to the foundation by Israel. And it is to Israel's credit that his government did not stand idle as Assad fell. The prompt action the IDF took in southern Syria in the days after Assad's departure helped ensure the weapons he had stockpiled would not fall into the wrong hands.
Oh, you mean the invade? They're still in southern Syria, by the way.
More than
I'll just
go for the last two.
He talks about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, basically how this was a win everywhere. But yeah, let's not forget that the Assad's, I'll read the last two paragraphs here, demise is also a setback for Putin's Russia, weakened by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. It's all tied up with a bow here. It could not afford the troops for the resources to maintain its murderous ally in the Middle East. Basically, they're saying that Syria makes Putin weaker. Terrorists defeated. Terrorists defeated. Tyrants toppled. Democracy defended. And Ukraine strengthened. Yep, it's Zionism time.
None of this would have happened if the Biden-Blinken team had their way. You bet you, because they're smelly anti-Semitic leftists.
Yes.
Russophobes, or not Russophobes, Russophiles and whatever else. Maybe it's time Joe and Anthony, calling them by the first
So,
names.
can you just say, so much winning? This is your MAGA winning, guys. Woo!
Where's
MAGA winning?
Where's Martin when you need him? That one's for AA in the chat.
Yeah, where's Martin? Where's Aaron McIntyre? Where's
let's leave him be for the moment.
Where's the old glory hole? Come on, guys. Tell us how this is a win. Tell us how this is a win, guys. Come on. I'm bursting.
Maybe it's time Joe and Anthony made amends to BB before they leave office on January 20th. Words are all very well, but what about something more tangible? Why not nominate the men and women of the IDF for the Nobel Peace Prize? Provocative, perhaps, but as a sign that Team Biden fully recognises that its weaknesses, that really is more provocative than strength, it would be truly enlightening. Michael Gove is editor of The Spectator. If you couldn't already tell.
We warned you. we really,
Martin!
I can't think of a more precise vindication of everything we have talked about than that. This is why I wanted to read it in full. Wow. But anyway,
people in the chat be like, "Who the heck is Martin?" Good. If you don't know, that's for you. That's your benefit.
What shul did you go to? Meet the British Jews drawn to Nigel Farage's party.
I forgot to say, on a completely unrelated manner.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on a completely unrelated Jewish chronicle.
And then for something completely different. Meet the vocal minority of Jews supporting the upstart party.
I mean, we of course welcome this, and we do love the nation of Israel, but this gets to be a little bit much.
God, when imagining of a member of Reform UK, we might conjure up a middle-aged man from the Shires wearing mustard-coloured chinos and a tweed jacket. However, a small, determined, and they claim growing, number of British Jews are throwing their lot in with Nigel Farage's new and surging right-wing party in an effort to break Labour and the Conservatives' domination of mainstream politics.
God. Here we go. Here we go. Rael Braverman, husband of former Secretary Suella.
Oh, they never guessed.
And he was grabbed headlines when he announced he was ditching the Conservatives to join Farage. Other Jewish members of Reform UK joined him in attacking the Board of Deputies' impartiality.
So wait, hold on a second. This is some form of gentleman of the Jewish diaspora that's married to a high-level Indian in Britain, and they're trying to run the West? How does this come about?
Attacking, yes. Other Jewish members of Reform UK joined in attacking the Board of Deputies' impartiality, claiming that the leadership is affiliated with the Jewish Labour movement, casting doubt on the objectivity of their critique. Again, Zionism versus diaspora. These are the only allowable political disagreements.
One person who certainly doesn't fit most people's ideas about a Reform UK typecast is Joshua Perrell, a 25-year-old Orthodox Jew trainee solicitor and part-time teacher at Kisharon Special Needs School who stood up for the party in Hendon at the last general election. They never said he's a Lotus Eaters Gold subscriber. Come on!
And also a fan of Zero Seats.
Oh,
big Zero Seat supporter.
I'm a young person and I'm extremely demoralised by the fact I'm not going to be able to afford a house. Oi Gewalt. It's because we have too many people for the housing supply that exists, and this is almost entirely due to mass immigration. Reform's UK policy is to end mass immigration, he says. I think as a young Jewish man, speaking like that in Britain, he should think about the struggle that every single one of his Holocaust surviving ancestors went through. Because talk like that, young man, is how people end up in camps, don't you know?
Well, it's I don't know. I have to... Sorry, I went on his Twitter, and the first thing you see is... It's just this. It's.
Have you got the desktop audio on?
Let me turn this. This is his. This is his pin.
I hate the online discourse from the online Nazis, where it's just like, oh, Jews, this explains everything. So it doesn't explain anything. You know, it's ideological. You know, this is definitely ideology. I hate the.
The piece then goes on to say. Barnet councillor Mark Shooter is Reform UK's first London councillor and their first Jewish one.
Well, which one is he?
He's the one. So he's Reform UK's first London councillor, and he's the first London councillor for Reform was Jewish. Fair enough. The 53-year-old former mayor of the of North London Borough and former student, blah blah blah. Where is it here?
Are you talking about the bit here where he says he campaigned against Pearl and only joined Reform UK in December last year?
I'm trying to find the bits about...
Reform UK, you refused to withdraw support for candidates who claimed that the UK should have stayed neutral during the Second World War and who compared COVID lockdowns with the Holocaust.
No, sorry. That's the bit I was trying to get to. Shooter says that since he joined Reform, vetting procedures had toughened, and that, by the way, that's him talking about hope, not hate.
Yeah.
This incident was one of the hope, not hate incidents.
Yeah.
This is the Reform ethno-religious members speaking directly about how Reform serves their ethno-religious interest. And at the party's Christmas party, the largest cheer in the room went to the party's sole London Assembly member, Alex Wilson, when he spoke out against anti-Semitism in the... What does this have to do with reforming Britain?
Yeah, Pearl is more flippant about the reported comments. I don't care about that at all. The point of the political party is not to agree on every ideological point. Challenge that had both candidates been successful and he had been elected, he could have been sitting in Parliament alongside someone who minimised the Holocaust. He says, I don't think anyone minimised the Holocaust. It was 12 million.
Yeah, but he was removed. He was deselected. Your party does.
But he said they don't have to, so it's different.
Yeah, the Conservative Party's failure to discipline former Minister Alan Duncan followed claims that he used anti-Semitic tropes in a radio interview was the final straw for him resigning after 47 years of membership, including standing as a parliamentary candidate in 1987 and 1992.
I've just noticed that West Streeting one in the corner as well. Health
God.
Secretary West Streeting shocked by NHS anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Well, he believes... talks about the vote share going
Oh God,
up.
he's talking about fucking Gogglebox and everything.
Yeah, he was running against a Gogglebox, Labour's Gogglebox star. So you've got someone from Gogglebox, the Deputy Prime Minister, and this guy. It's just, I was campaigning on stopping the anti-Semitic marches going on in London. I just thought what was happening on our streets was terrible. So that's a primary reform campaign issue, is it? That Zionism should be policy. Fair enough.
If you've got a party that says we're going to reduce this problem, going to reduce the numbers coming in from all places, then that's obviously going to have appeal to them. Them being Jews.
Like I say, UK's support for reforming among visibly Orthodox Jews in Stamford Hill. I've got friends who live out there and who feel quite uncomfortable a lot of the time. This is exactly what Conor Tomlinson said, though. It's exactly what Ali Hurst Ali said. It's exactly what Nigel Farage said. It's exactly what was it's exactly what was being said earlier about the comfort and the definition of anti-Semitism, both about Muslims and about Jewish people, that we have to make sure that the primary focus of our society is making these people feel comfortable and welcome. Because we can't have our own client group. We can't be our own client group. Everything must be filtered through protecting a minority group. And we must pick a minority to defend.
Yes.
And that's what all of this is about. But as I explained on Twitter, it's just like, well, surely you can see how the superseding of a nativist British party by outside interest that it must attach itself to fit itself into the civil rights framework is completely self-defeating. You're having a conversation about a tiny subset of British people and their comfort in this country. You're not having a debate about Britain and the British, and you are constantly failing to do so. That's what the difference is here. It's the civil rights category. They can't be just as British as you are because they have their own carve-out.
They're more British than us.
Yes, and by having that extra carve-out, they differentiate themselves from you, never mind culturally or ethnically, they do it legally. They are legally distinct from a native British person because of their civil rights status. And that is the difference. Well, here we are at the amnesia point. Here we go with the great forgetting. I just couldn't. It's just. It's In 2021, I set out to destroy the woke wine virus, and now it has been deleted.
Ugh, delete this post.
Again, we're not trying to pick on people here, but this is a great example of how, when something like this happens, when an issue makes its way into the zeitgeist, that people immediately try and hide all their quote-unquote unpalatable positions when it comes to everything else.
Yes.
And we end up completely conceding to the civil rights framework, but trying to elevate the one single issue. Shall I just play this one again?
Yeah, might as well.
The Second Amendment.
Let me interrupt you again.
Sorry.
So 2 things on this. The first one is most communities in Britain don't do this, right? Most of the foreign communities in Britain. Now, there's a different issue with just the sheer number of people who have come to Britain, which is displacing the native English from their own cities. That's a different issue. But most of the other communities, the Indians, the Chinese, the Africans, they don't form grooming gangs like this. This seems to be a specifically Islamic phenomenon. Actually, so I don't want all of the migrant communities to be tarred with the same brush on this. This is a peculiar evil to one kind of community. Most of the others, I mean, again, demographic issues aside, most of the others are not predatory. Most of the others are completely fine. Like, no one has a personal objection to, like, the Nepalese community or the Chinese community or something like this. They're all perfectly reasonable people to have around. The second point is, where are the fathers, where are the dads? Well, that's what the EDL.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to add other than I might as well just read the sort of tweets I've got around this, because it's basically all you can really say. Why is it whenever we approach a fever pitch on certain issues, everyone must retreat back to 2016 and put aside racialism and understanding and seeing race? I can quite reasonably not want any other ethnic group in Britain because it is Britain. I needn't justify it by their behaviour.
Yeah.
And there is some weird attempt by Carl in this sort of clip. Maybe it's an accident. I'd like to see him explain himself. But he seems to suggest that in some sort of way, well, because they're not Muslims, Africans or Chinese are just like us. And I'm sorry, but they're not like us. And I think he understands that that's weak, because he then goes and says, well, you wouldn't have a problem with some Nepalese guy living at the end of the street trying to deliberately pick such a small, nuanced and particular group in an attempt to make it not seem obvious that you're being replaced, and you're being replaced by people who know they're doing it.
Well,
that's the vital point, is they know they're fucking doing it. I don't care if the African guy that works at the coffee shop's really pally and gives you a 10% discount. He knows that more of him means less of us. And that just can't go on. And that frame of, as you say, civil rights and not engaging in the racial aspect and talking about Islamism and the culture without the ethnicity, it's a backwards step. And I also want to make one small further note on this. I couldn't tell you what views this stream from Carl and Auron is on just now. However, I can tell you within about 3 days, about 8,000 people had seen it, and it probably maybe got a little bit more than that when it filters in, and YouTube backend and whatever else. But clearly, that's a big crossover, isn't it? Auron's got like a 40-odd thousand subscriber channel. Sargon, you know, Sargon, remember him?
You remember Sargon?
They're talking to each other right as millions, we're being told, millions of people are engaging on this issue on Twitter every hour. So how is the stream that they did on this, discussing this in depth for an hour and a half, perform poorly?
Well, the whole point is that a lot of this isn't really moving. We don't know if this is quote-unquote moving the needle. People are being told it is. People are seeing it in their Twitter feeds and they are becoming excited. They are becoming agitated. But it's not real. What's happening isn't real. People are talking about it on the internet. The press are reacting to that. The Prime Minister reacting to that makes it feel like it's real. But nothing has happened. And now we must acknowledge that nothing has happened. Because nothing has happened.
This changes nothing.
We haven't even got an inquiry, which isn't what you wanted anyway, because that's a massive waste of time. I don't think I have to justify to people here why an inquiry would be a bad idea. You're all a lot smarter than that. But the issue is that they haven't even managed to extract that. There has been this massive push for compromise, this attempt to show narrative dominance by the online right, and it's in fact shown that you can't have narrative dominance because you have no real-world levers to pull.
You are chumming the waters with no net. How are you going to catch the fish?
Well, something I want to talk about, another aspect of political amnesia that we've talked about before, and something people completely forgot about, is the Stop the Boats campaign.
Yes.
The Stop the Boats campaign is a great historical example, a recent historical example of what happens when you create political energy in the way that the grooming gangs, in quote, debate did. We went from, here we are, this is February 2023, asylum seeker hotel protest to take place in Skegness in UK. Far-right patriotic alternative leads demonstration in Lincolnshire, while counter-protests in Cornwall say refugees welcome. This is a Stop the Boats and Empty the Hotels campaign.
And I just want to say, as sort of prerequisite to this, we are going to make the assumption that Stop the Boats, as a tagline, was purely grassroots, purely organic, for the sake of argument. It came from nowhere. Like, enough is enough, you know? These are organic phrases that came from the grassroots, from bottom up, and that's why they're powerful, of course.
Yes.
So how come is it then that everyone from, as you say, Mark Collett to Zionists that write for the Telegraph to Rakib Eshan to all sorts of other different people are all saying stop the boats?
Well, here we have oral statement to Parliament, Home Secretary statement on the illegal immigration bill. The Home Secretary updated the House of Commons on new legislation to stop the boats. We had this co-opted. Stop the Boats went from a far-right dog whistle to a government policy in a matter of weeks. And it did so whilst covering up the legal, in quotes, immigration. We've been over this when we talked about the infinite migrant camp. The Stop the Boats narrative was to cover up the legal numbers and have people focus obsessively on about 40,000 people coming in visibly via these small boats. There was a grassroots campaign that was completely hijacked by the Tory government. They were left high and dry when the Tory party, and especially the Prime Minister at the time, the delivery driver himself, he talked about this during performative failure as well. He came in and he said, stop the boats. And by creating that political energy, they didn't have anywhere to put it.
I mean, how did anyone think that, you know, Mark Collett and Sam Melia from Patriotic Alternative campaigning under the same phrase that Rishi Sunak has written on a lectern in front of him was going to go anywhere?
Well, the whole point,
or, dare I say, going to go in any direction that wasn't preset beforehand.
I mean,
and this is part of it, I think, as well, is that if we do get into the realms of speculating where a narrative like stop the boats or stop the grooming gangs has actually come from, we could really begin to consider, well, who actually benefits from awareness of this stuff in the first place? Because it's definitely not us.
Again, the creation of political energy is something you should be careful of. And quite honestly, we warned AA about this when he went the whole zero seats direction. I understand why he did it. I understand the appeal of it, but you have to keep control of your own project, or else you're just creating political energy for the people. And Stop the Boats was the perfect example of that. What was for years a heavily suppressed street movement of people with placards being immediately arrested by the police outside migrant hotels and outside holding centres near the south coast became official Tory policy. People were dizzied for a moment. People thought they'd won. And then they realised that they did so because it ensured, it guaranteed that nothing would happen. Just like a public inquiry would guarantee that nothing would happen. Just like, as we've talked about, it's learned helplessness. What you get from this is you get the issue raised, we have a liberal conversation about it, there's reports into it, there's government papers, there's legislation, and then nothing happens, but it feels like something's happened. And more to the point, people get sick of talking about it. People are now sick of hearing about this grooming gangs narrative. They think it is very last week. They have moved on from it.
Well, yes, and I've sort of got a note here. When this narrative, be it Stop the Boats, grooming gangs, or whatever for that matter, does reach its fever pitch, and there is a typically poorly organised effort for accountability, who do they go to?
Yeah.
Not us, because we're not in power. It's the same old elites who've been running the show all along. The same people who might have actually started the momentum in that conversation themselves. Because at the end of the day, it's up to them about whether or not we get to hear about it. We could sit and talk about it all day if we want. And I think, more than anything else, the existence of the online right has shown the fact that you can talk about this stuff all fucking day if you want. And they will let you. They'll pretend you're the enemy, but they'll let you. Because they know that you talking about it online, they can watch you, they can listen to you, and they know you're not going anywhere. We all happen to disappear off the internet tomorrow and, shut the borders or whatever other our next slogan was, appeared spray painted on thousands of walls across Britain with absolutely no notion or origin of where it came from. Now that would be something. But we can't have that because everyone has to be part of the movement.
Yes.
We've all got to be online. We've all got to help Elon and Tommy raise awareness so that we can all rise up in some sort of colour revolution and knock over Keir Starmer.
Well, again, I would like to give a few more examples of just this cycle of political amnesia we've been having. It's very obvious, but the biggest one is COVID. Like, look how nothing happened. The page was turned and all the energy was dissipated with the lockdowns. People thought that the sheeple would wake up. They actually did it. They basically put on like a blue beam folder and told you the big one was happening and to stay at home because the economy had fallen apart.
Yep.
They had broken the managerial machine and their solution was to say that you should stay home. But we have here, this is from was this yesterday? This is from today. Djokovic must forgive and forget his shoddy COVID experience in Australia. And I was actually talking to you about this the other day, about the fact that the treatment of Novak Djokovic in the tennis world has got a lot of your middle-aged tennis women up in arms about it. People genuinely saw how unfair that was. And it made people think, like, well, what the hell's been happening with all this? But it doesn't move the needle anymore because COVID might as well have happened 20 years ago.
And those same people are too busy being TERFs on Mumsnet anyway.
Well, that's the whole point, is that the previous political paradigm doesn't move the needle. And that's the point about woke, in that it is now the previous political paradigm, and increasingly you get diminishing returns from it, as you have with COVID. I mean, the whole COVID thing is dead.
Yeah.
It is utterly dead.
I mean, I'll be honest, I sort of myself will look down on people that are like COVID truthers now, because it's like, you're either here because you've been set up to absorb what energy's left in this, or you are so fucking clueless and behind it you can't see that the ship has sailed.
It's gone.
I mean,
it's again. I always bring. It's like the Iraq War.
Or dare I say, what you should have really taken away from the last couple of weeks is that the grooming gang issue has sailed. I mean, that feels a bit horrible to say myself, but it's sailed. It's gone. That moment cannot be captured anymore. And whether or not that moment actually existed as a real fever pitch that we could measure won't ever be found out either. But I'm going to presume that it didn't happen.
The British people are numb to the grooming gangs. They simply do not care. It is another thing that is awful that they have seen in the news cycle that happened in their mind years ago. It is just another thing on the pile of bad things. And that is unfortunately the truth. Another part of the story I find interesting is the newish anti-Islamification push has very little about halal meals. And I love stories like this because they show you where the defaults is. Sheffield Primary School investigates after non-halal chicken served. It is national news.
God, that's almost like one of those phrases out of Jeremy Carl's book about the white underclass.
Yes.
Non-Jewish whites. Non-halal chicken
It is
non-Jewish
national
whites.
news when a UK primary school serves a non-halal meal. That is how universal the penetration is of Islamic religious slaughter into the institutions of Britain. And I will also remind people that kosher and halal in terms of practice are interchangeable, and I will leave it at that.
Yes. But one man's ritual slaughter is another.
Here's another bit of agitation from the Telegraph. Inside the priority NHS services for migrants, the asylum seekers receiving preferential medical treatment despite increasing wait times for Britons. This has been going on forever.
Yep.
What you're having again is fake revelation. We've known this for the entirety of the Blair era, at least. I mean, we were talking about the preferential treatment of asylum seekers back in the late 90s. And here we are again. And I know we try to... some people think we're dicks about it, but this is why we tell people to step over so much of the endless conversation. This is why we tell people to, focus on the basics and focus on things outside the news cycle. And in the political moment, people get... And you've seen people do it, if you follow us online anyway, you've seen people get bittingly angry, like cryingly angry, tears falling down their face angry because we will not acquiesce to the current moment. We will not report the Telegraph headline sincerely. We will not report the line. But these are set externally. It's things as simple as who is setting your narratives. And if you move on with the news cycle, then your enemy is setting your narratives. And that is the source of this political amnesia. It's a long-running thing in Western politics, and it's getting worse. And if you live online, if you're part of the online right, especially if you live on Twitter, it is even faster than people who follow the normal news cycle. And it started to pull itself into the normal news cycle when it runs out of ideas. Twitter is not news. No. The words of Elon Musk are not actually news, but it gives, like Trump during his peak era in 2015 and 2016, it gives the media something to talk about. If you're raising awareness, what you're really doing is just allowing the media to take your talking points, reinterpret them, and piggyback on the energy you've created and are able to capture it within their own framing. And like I said, do you have a political organization that can utilize people? Do you have a political organization that you are in charge of, or that the people are in charge of, who you can send to work with these people who have been politically awakened by your raising of awareness on the internet? And if you don't, why are you doing it? Why are you generating all this energy that will be used by other people?
Please, for the love of God, if you haven't already, go and read my piece called "The Masses Are Already Red-Pilled," or I believe it was "Red-Pilling the Masses," which is exactly a discussion of this dynamic. And I'm going to say it once again. Don't go out there chumming the waters when you don't have a net. They're going to be somebody else's fish. It's that simple.
Yeah, I would. Yeah,
or don't be the thin end of somebody else's wedge, as I once said.
Yeah, the point is that I was going to use that line. Do not be the thin end of someone else's wedge. Do not be someone else's political dynamo. Do not run around with your hair on fire, creating narrative energy that will be harnessed by other people. That is the whole point. The whole point of why we pointed out the containment network is that they feed off the energy
feed
created.
Off you.
Yes.
You, the viewer. You, as far as we are concerned, should do nothing. You should disengage. And this is, I think, the stream we had a couple of weeks back, and Yez was making the point in the chat that, I think their problem is with radicalism, not with apathy. No, their problem is with apathy. Andrew Gold, Winston Marshall, the New Culture Forum, and all these podcasts and people and faces and names and heroes and enemies and heroes, and all of this is going on, and millions is being spent. Not one person is planning on making a profit out of this, because the product and the thing they want to utilise is you, the viewer, and what little element of it in you that isn't just pure passivity you want to tap in.
If you can do something about this immediately, if you feel you are useless to real-world immediate organisation, please get in contact with us and we would like to work with you. If you do not feel that is for you and you simply feel powerless and overwhelmed by this constant cycle of news, stop looking at it. Go and live your life. Go and be with your family. Go and focus on creating a skill. Go and be a person. This politics
Exfiltrate.
Yes, politics isn't for you. 99% of people, politics isn't for you.
It isn't for us either.
It isn't for us either. Don't worry about it. Don't subsume yourself within it. Don't live through it. Unless you feel that you can immediately help to raise the lot of the native British population in a constructive way, sitting around fretting about it will not do anything.
If anything, you're just going to make it worse.
And the thing that you were fretting about will be forgotten about within a week. Break yourself out of this cycle. Do not let this live rent-free in your head, because so many people do. This is not something you have to attach yourself to. You can't mentally solve the world's problems, but so many people have committed themselves to doing so. We inform, but we do so because we'd like you to drop out. We would like you to, as we say, electoral politics isn't real. The narrative isn't real. None of what you're seeing is real. What is real is the permanent project of the bureaucracy, it is the decline that is going on, and it is the dissolving of the traditional bonds that make up European nations. That is what is happening. Apart from that, nothing else is happening, because that really, managed decline, is what is going on. Think of how you can improve things constructively and stop running around in mental circles.
Yeah.
Free yourself from it, please.
I think I've been Evelyn.
Yes.
That's been Scrump. I don't know, I'm trying to do some sort of weird outro here and it's not really working, but thank you for joining us this evening. I know we don't stream as regularly as we did at one point, but that is fundamentally the consequence of the fact that we just can't stand being involved with this stuff sometimes. So unless it's actually like willing us to do something about it, I'm sorry, but it's just not going to happen, because nothing happens anyway. Yes. However, thank you for watching. Thank you to those who support our stuff, whether you do so regularly or on the odd occasion by super chatting and whatnot. I suppose in some way you are some of the reasons why we do carry on doing this stuff. So please do stick around, and I suppose we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.
Go to the pub.